Searching the internet for crashed World War II aircraft, I found this picture of an American P-51 shot down somewhere in Italy. There are several things I like about this picture. It appears the pilot was able to bail out or get out unscathed. The damage looks like something I could recreate, and they're railroad tracks. Anytime I get to combine railroading and scale modeling seems like a double win for me. Since I was going to have to hack up the airplane kit, I knew I was going to go grab that cheap AirFix kit, and finding it on sale for 40% off was just a bonus. I won't bore you with the actual kit building, but rather focus on how I created some of the damage and the diorama. Before we jump into the damage, however, I need to modify the tail elevators to show them in the down position like in the photo. I started with a scribing tool to deepen the molded lines up for the elevators. And finished the parting of the parts with a sharp hobby blade. I used the same technique to part the panels from the front engine covers with my original intent of using the parts to mold some aluminum foil. The foil part would then be used in place to the plastic and make for in-scale damaged skin panels. Needless to say, it proved much harder to pull off than I thought. The foil was too weak to actually hold the shape without something underneath it supporting it. And the plastic bits were too thick anyhow. So what I decided to do was take the original plastic bits and cut away where I needed the damage to be. In this case, I didn't have to be super precise, so I just used a pair of snippers. And then take the foil and lay it directly over the entire plastic part after I glued it back in place. And this way I could then crumple or lift up the panels where appropriate, and the foil still gave that look of finished in-scale thickness for the aluminum skin. I also used foil around the wing roots of the rear port side to make the panels in that location look crumpled as well. PVA glue was used to adhere the foil to all the plastic. It's not a super strong bond, but I used tacky glue, which gives a good initial stick and gives you enough time before it sets up to correct placement that super glue would not allow you to do. If you're really worried about the foil peeling off after the PVA glue cures, you could come back with a toothpick and add little dabs of super glue to kind of lock it in place. So the final results aren't winning any competitions. Let's not kid ourselves here. But then I do build these dioramas for my own satisfaction, not to go win some gold medals. Metal propellers bend and twist on a belly landing, and the photo clearly shows this has happened. I took my handy-dandy butane torch, and using metal tweezers, I quickly passed the plastic through the torch flame and then gave the plastic a gentle bend. For time, than to rush and just completely melt the props. You only get one set of these props on the sprue, so it's incumbent not to destroy it. Another big part of the damage in the photo was the landing gear. It looks like the pilot got at least the port side landing gear down. I needed the landing strut without a tire and a tire to lay across the leading edge of the wing. Grabbing my small Dremel tool, I sanded away all the tire parts from one wheel. After the wheel was gone, I took a shaped grinding stone tool, added it back to the Dremel, and used this to shape the inside of the wheel hub. At this scale, just a nice wide groove would look the part. Finally, using a little extra thin model cement, I brushed this around the inside of the hub. For the lone tire, I just used a series of drill bits to get most of the hub drilled out of the center and leave just the tire. I did the finishing up work with a tapered grinding stone and cleaned the inside of the part with cement like I did before. And while I had the Dremel tool out, I decided to thin one of the fuselage sidewalls. This is, again, another long, slow process that requires eye protection and a dust mask. You have to go in stages and take breaks as the plastic will heat up from all the grinding, and it might start to melt and ruin the effect on the surface. Periodically, I would check my work by shining a light from the inside and see what progress I was making on thinning out the sidewall. In the later stages, I used my finger on the finished surface to lend support and the feel for the heat buildup. And here is where I ended up. The plastic wall is quite paper thin at this point. The rest of the assembly went together easily enough with a little putty, as is the norm for even modern AirFix kits. AirFix. The whole thing then got a coat of gray surface primer just to get all the various materials to the same shade and give the paint something to stick to so it wouldn't flake off the foil while sticking to the plastic. Also, this gives me a chance to highlight any seams or alignment issues. And while the primer cured, it's now time to start on the diorama base. The diorama base is built up from half-inch layers of foam insulation and cork for the railroad bed. I made sure to have the railroad tracks not run perpendicular to the edge of the foam base. This is for visual interest and to keep the focus on the crashed plane. Once the foam was cut to shape and the back hill height established, it was time to carve out a little gully for the crashed plane to settle into. And then I took a wood rasp to the foam. This does generate a lot of little foam chips, so think ahead. I laid down some plastic trash bags on my garage floor and scooped up all the shavings all at once. Otherwise, you will be forever finding those chips in your hobby space. Go ahead, ask me how I know. All the foam and cork were glued together with a simple PVA glue. Once the PVA was cured, overnight or a little longer, I decided to use up the rest of the air-dried clay I had left over from the tank build, hoping this time it wouldn't crack so badly. However, it did crack after curing. I'm just not sure if I'm putting it on too thick or too thin, or if it's the high humidity that I'm living in right now, but I came back in with a very thin layer of plaster and I smoothed everything out, as you can see in the picture. All of the ground got a base coat of medium chocolate brown craft acrylic paint. This is just to cover all the white plaster and keep it from showing through any of the ground cover to come. The plastic scale tracks were from a Chinese company called Kilo Kits. They glue up rather quickly, and after a black prime and dark brown top coat, they were ready to be glued in place. Once again, I turned to a simple PVA glue, but this time I used it to cover all the cork, and I put it on fairly thick. This allowed me, after I got the track placed where I wanted it, to come back with some coarse ballast from Woodland Scenics. The basic technique is to just pour it on and sweep the excess out from the ties with a soft brush and using some gentle taps on the tracks to settle the ballast in between the ties. I also used the brush to pull ballast up to the edges to build up the sides, kind of make it look like the tracks and ties were sitting on a deep pile of ballast to stabilize them. To set the top layers in place, I started with a very light mist of isopropyl alcohol to break the surface tension, and then using a pipette, I applied watered down PVA all over the loose ballast. This will set all the ballast in place and keep it there. Now, because it's highly diluted, it takes a long time for the water to off-gas, so I gave it another overnight dry, but a couple of days would not be bad either. Then I came back in with some sprue cutters and just cut the plastic trackage flush with the edge of the diorama. Time to add grass. First, with some fine turf to set the undergrowth. This just needs a very thin layer of PVA and a little time to dry. Then comes the longer static grass. I used an older paintbrush to liberally apply the PVA glue in areas that the crashed P-51 would not be sitting on, and then several passes with a static grass applicator, and we have all the grass that we need on the diorama. After the grass had finished curing and drying, I came back with some weathering powders to add to the ballast and the tracks to give them that used look. I mean, trains are always shedding brake dust, grease, oil, all kinds of stuff that just stains the rocks and the tracks and the ties. Off camera, because I forgot to hit the record button, I added some hedge to the top of the hill. These were O-gauge railroad bushes, but they make nice looking hedges at 1/72nd scale. I did add some burnt grass turf to them using the hairspray method just to knock back the kind of green plasticky color of the cheap accessories. Coming back to the plane, I tried to actually paint the national markings on, but it didn't work out this time. I tried to hand cut the masks because the shapes look kind of simple, and I should have worked harder to get the vinyl cutter working because it cuts very precise shapes, and the removable vinyl for the Cricut machine just seals up so much nicer, and it's easier to index things. So, like I said, it didn't work out. The shapes didn't look right. It looked very cartoonish. So I just came back and resprayed the whole airplane before adding decals in the kit. And then I remembered that I did all that fuselage thinning. Yeah, I forgot about it until I started the weathering. So a quick hole was drilled and some smoke was smeared down the fuselage. It's kind of hard to see in the final pictures, and it's just as hard to see in person. So this might be more technically suited for larger scales, but I wanted to try it, and now I have it in my repertoire. Anyway, here's the final diorama. First up is an overall look of the finished piece. And you can kind of see the hedges and the tracks and how they play together. A forced perspective from a similar view as seen in the photo. And finally, a side-by-side reveal. I had a lot of fun with this build, and I hope you enjoyed watching me crash a P-51 in Italy. And until next time, happy hobbying.